Alright, so the main project for this chapter is going to be a snake game, very similar to the one that was available on most cell phones maybe 10-15 years ago. But before we get into that, I just want to introduce you to the canvas element. Hopefully maybe you have some experience using canvas. Basically it's used to draw shapes, to animate images. You can do all kinds of things with it, but in this particular video I just want to kind of introduce the absolute basics of the canvas element. Alright, now canvas is an HTML5 element, but you need to write scripts in order to make it do anything. Alright, HTML5 takes care of the element itself, exactly that, a canvas, and we'll use JavaScript to do whatever we want to do. In this video, we'll just what we're going to do is create a logo, and I'll just open that up and show you. Alright, so very simple logo. This is not an image. None of this is an image. It's all done with canvas and JavaScript. Alright, so basically we have two shapes. One shape has a stroke or a border, and then we can also create text with the canvas element. And you can see that the text actually is gradient, has a gradient coloring. And then we have a line, which we can do in canvas as well. We can draw and connect lines to make different kinds of shapes and images. Alright, so we'll do that, and then I want to give you a very basic introduction to animation. Alright, so we're going to create this, which is just a black canvas, and we created some circles, and we're just going to animate them across and down the canvas. Alright, so very simple. So let's get started on the logo first. Alright, so we have our finished product here. I'm just going to create, actually I'm going to rename this here. Okay, so that's our finished one. So let's create a new folder called Canvas, and then in there we'll create a new document, canvas.html. I'm not going to use any external JavaScript files. I'm just going to do it all in one file. It's not that much code, so. Alright, so here's our HTML file. Whoop, I just want to paste in just a basic structure. Alright, so we have our head and body tags, and what I want to do first is create the actual canvas. Alright, so in the body is where we're going to create it, and we just want to say canvas excuse me, and we're going to give this an ID, and we'll call it my canvas. Alright, because we're going to use JavaScript, and in order to grab this element we're going to use the get element by ID method. Okay, so an ID. We also want to define a width. We're going to say 400, and also a height, and height will be 150. Whoop. And that's it. We want to close this. Alright, now if your user is using a browser that doesn't support Canvas, you can actually do whatever you want to happen when they visit the page right in here, right in between the canvas tags. So we'll just say, sorry, your browser doesn't use the canvas feature. Alright, so they'll just see that message if their browser doesn't support it. All the latest versions of all the modern browsers do support Canvas, but you never know. Some people don't update their browser as often as they should. Alright, so that is actually it for our HTML. Alright, so very simple. All the work, all the power comes from your JavaScript. So that's what we're going to do now. Actually, if we save this and take a look, we don't see anything, and the reason for that is by default the canvas is going to be just white and there's no border. So what we want to do is just add a little bit of CSS to give it a border so that we can actually see where it starts and where it begins. Alright, so up here we'll just create some style tags, and we can actually just grab it with Canvas, and we're going to give it a border. We'll give it a black border, 1 pixel solid. Alright, so take a look at that. Now we can see our canvas. Alright, remember, this is what we're going to be doing. So we'll start with the squares and then move on to the text and then the line. Alright, so let's open up some script tags for our JavaScript. So we're going to have 2 main functions here. Okay, so the first one is going to be called init. Okay, this will initialize everything for us. This will initialize the canvas. Alright, and then we want another function called draw. Okay, so this is the function we're going to use to draw the whole thing, the rectangles, the text, everything. Alright, so at the top, before we call these functions, we need to set a few variables. Alright, so the first one I'm going to call just C, and that's going to equal the canvas element itself. Alright, so we can grab that with document dot get element by ID. Alright, and the ID that we want is my canvas. Alright, so that's just grabbing this element. Now we have to create a context variable. Actually, this isn't what I wanted to do. I want to actually set this in the init function. I just want to initialize the variables up here. So I'm going to take this and cut this out. Alright, and in the initializer, we're just going to say C equals the canvas. Alright, and then up here we'll initialize another variable called CTX, and that's going to be the context. That's going to be the object that we run all of our methods on. So in here we want to say CTX equals C, which is our canvas element, dot get context. Alright, and then in here we need to pass in a parameter 2D, alright, because we're going to be working with 2D shapes and objects. Alright, so that's the initializer. Then the last thing we want to do is just call the draw method or function. Alright, so it's just going to call this. So that's all we need for the initializer. Alright, and then down here is where we can start to create shapes. Alright, so we have our context. We can use that CTX variable. So the first thing we want to do is let's decide what color we want. We're going to draw a rectangle, or I'm sorry, a square, and let's make it, we'll draw a red square. Alright, so we want to say CTX dot fill style is going to equal, and we can use colors here. We can use the word red, we can use hexadecimal, we can use RGBA, pretty much any kind of coloring system. I'm just going to use hexadecimal, and we're going to make this red. Alright, so that alone won't do anything. In fact, if we save and reload, we don't see anything. Alright, because we're just setting the color. The next thing we're going to do is actually draw the rectangle. Alright, and I say rectangle even though it's a square, but Canvas sees it as a rectangle. So I'm going to say CTX fill style. Alright, so this basically is going to be the color that we want this shape to be. Okay, and you can use words, you can use red, you can use RGBA values, and you can use hexadecimal. Alright, so I'm going to put the hexadecimal value for red, FF0000. Alright, and that's not going to do anything yet. It's going to just set the color. In order to create the shape, we need to do CTX dot fill rect. Alright, so fill rectangle, and that's going to take 4 parameters. The first is going to be the position on the x-axis. Alright, so if we look at our canvas, the x-axis runs horizontally, so the amount of pixels from here is going to be the first parameter. The second parameter is going to be the y-axis, so from the top down. Alright, so let's go ahead and do, we'll say 30 pixels from the left and then 30 pixels from the top. That's where we're going to place this shape. And then the next two parameters are actually going to be the size. Alright, so we'll give it a width of 50 and a height of 50. Alright, now if we save this and reload, we're not going to see anything because we haven't actually called the init function. So we need to do that. And you can do that a few different ways. What I'm going to do here is just add a handler. We're going to say when the body on load, then we're going to call init. Alright, so that means when this body tag loads, it's going to call this function here, which is going to set our canvas objects or variables, and then call the draw method. Alright, so save that. And now we have a red square, and you can see that it's 30 from the x and y, and it's 50 in height and width. Alright, so that's pretty easy, very minimal amount of code. Now let's say we want to give this square a border. Alright, so it's a red square, let's give it a black border, or what's called stroke. Alright, so right under where we created the rectangle, we want to use that same object, CTX, and we can give the border a color. Just like fill style, we'll have stroke style. And let's set that to black. Alright, so again, this is just setting the color. We haven't actually gave it the border yet. To do that, we want to do CTX